Norma Seledon, and last name is Seledon. I was in my early 30s. I was in a heterosexual marriage, and I had two very close, wonderful friends who were lesbians, and I think I came out unconsciously before I came out consciously. So there was a conversation between them, something political, and I felt very strongly and said, I believe that people should be with whoever they want to be. And so they turned to me and they said, well, what is it that you believe about yourself? Who would you want to be with? Well, I felt cornered by that, and I didn't answer. And I dashed out of the room as fast as I could and couldn't sleep all night. So the next day I came back and I said, you know, I think I'm attracted to women. And so that was the luckiest thing that could happen, because for the next couple of years there was, I was coming out to myself, and they were being very gentle and very supportive in helping me discover this newfound identity. And so I really didn't have my first relationship with a woman until about that time. But what I discovered actually a couple of years ago is that I had kissed a girl when I was about 8 years old, and I completely had blocked that out. And then just in having an encounter with a current girlfriend, it just came back to me all of a sudden. And so I think that that was something that was suppressed for a very, very long time, because I even remember in high school not being curious about rumors that I heard about girls kissing each other, and I just thought, oh my gosh, that's disgusting, tell me more. And so I think that there were things that were present there for a long time. And then just because of circumstances, because of culture, because of just the times, because lack of role models, things never were that apparent to me until I was an adult. I think that the most difficult conversations were probably one when I was outed, and I can talk about that in a second, but the other most important conversations were with people whose love and support I was at risk of losing by coming out. And first and foremost were my children, because I knew that this world wasn't completely embracing of LGBTQ populations, and they were going to be in it by default. And I was very concerned because this was something that was going to be forced upon them. And so that was very scary. I was concerned more about them. There was a point where I almost lost them. Because my ex, because I shared my orientation or my feelings with him, and there was a horrible divorce, and I almost lost them. And my parents, because, you know, especially as a Mexicana, our family is key, and if I would have lost him, I think that would have been devastating. I think a lot of us join groups where family is replaced because family has isolated them. That wasn't the case for me, but it was awfully scary to risk that by coming out, and actually was outed, and so that made it even more difficult. So at the time that I was discovering my attraction to women, I was married. I was in a heterosexual marriage. I have 3 children. And my ex-husband was okay with it for about 3 minutes. And then it wasn't okay. And I imagine there was a lot of fear and a lot of self-doubt that came with this. I realize now in retrospect, but he was furious. I also had become involved through the process of coming out. I had become involved with someone. I fell in love with a woman and tried to be honest, but things didn't work out. And so there was a horrible 3-year divorce, and I think his plan to get back at me was outing me at work. And so unfortunately I lost a dream job, and lost a lot of connections to community because of it. And it was a community of women, it was a community of Latinas, and so things it took a long time to repair those. And I have repaired them, and I think that the experience has taken me in directions where I probably would not have gone, particularly around activism, to make sure that other women were supported. But I think that during that period it was very, very difficult. And I realized how ingrained homophobia was, and even in an organization that was supposed to be empowering women, I ended up not feeling very empowered, and as a matter of fact, re-victimized by what was happening. And these are complicated issues. It wasn't an easy situation for anyone involved, but it was a very difficult period. And I almost lost my children, I lost my job, and at the time I almost lost my partner because my partner was also sued by my ex-husband for taking me away from him, using very antiquated laws that were insulting, frankly, because I was being spoken about as if I were a possession and as if I couldn't make decisions for myself. My relationship with my kids is beautiful. I had always raised them to be respectful of others, and was really very surprised that they were so respectful of my journey. They were in their mid-teens when I came out to them, and I had a 4-year-old who is now 23 at the time. And it's very interesting because they lost a lot of friends in high school because they came out. They chose to participate in the Day of Silence. And I think that their understanding of sexuality and their cultural competency has increased tremendously, I think, because of this process. Not exclusively because of this process, my process, but there's a lot of things that they've learned. And even now, it's really funny, but when they choose partners or when they choose to date, that is one of the first filters for potential candidates, is they'll ask them about their feelings about the LGBTQ community or same-sex marriage, and that's often an indicator whether this individual is someone worth pursuing a relationship with. So it's very, very interesting that that has happened. The woman I was with, I lost to cancer in 2010. And so this woman played a huge role in helping me raise my children. And they all consider her their co-mother, their other parent or their third parent. Their father was never out of their lives, but this woman played a big role. And it was a huge loss. And even for the little one who often struggled, sometimes in school, about coming out as having two mothers, to this day experiences a huge loss when thinking about her not being in her life. We come out in different stages, and we come out to different people, and I think the process never ends. So we enter different spaces, and when spaces often don't feel safe, or often we don't want to lead with our sexual orientation, then we may come out at different times. Oftentimes I find that the Latino voice is missing. I think that we need to see that there is diversity within the community, and I think that I can bring in a different voice. So I think that I don't often lead with my orientation unless it's necessary. And I find as I get older that it is more and more necessary. So about a year ago, I was very fortunate to be inducted into the Chicago LGBTQ Hall of Fame. It was a huge honor. And I think that it wasn't until I put down on paper all of the things that I had done for community that I had realized that I had been involved in a lot of things that promoted equity, especially around LGBTQ families, LGBTQ individuals. And so for me, it is a call to action. So I'm being recognized publicly for work I've done, but it's also an invitation to step up and to continue to do things, and to really celebrate all of the identity intersections, and to play a role in helping individuals highlight or help their strengths grow around their identities, and to be voices for those individuals where intersection of identities might get blurred. Being a woman, being a Latina, being a mother, being a student, all of those things when they intersect mean much more than just being labeled a lesbian or being labeled a Mexicana or being labeled an activist. And so I think when we look at all of those, that richness of intersection, I think we are much stronger. And so I feel that being acknowledged for work that I've done allows me to continue to help people explore that and the power of those intersections. It's when we intersect at a humanity level, when we tell stories, and this is why telling my story is so important. I think we break down barriers, and I think that's when we can learn to support each other, because once one person is hurt, then we're all hurt, and I think that we don't often realize that. I think that we tend to see in movements, and most movements that are in your face, we tend to see young faces and young people, which is beautiful and wonderful, and it's energizing to intersect with those individuals. But I think that we often forget that there are older people, and that these issues are just as important. And maybe some of us have become less active because we are working or studying or painting our house. But I think that, and this should be a call to action to older people too, to be front and center and be in the streets. But I think that we should not forget that we can be activists also from different places that are not often the streets. And those are important things to recognize. There are multiple reasons why people should come out publicly. But I think that the most important reason is probably about authenticity, and authenticity to yourself. I think first and foremost, that's the most important thing. And then the other reason is that these times call for you to be proud and be unapologetic about who you are. I think there is a lot of marginalization that happens. There's a lot of oppression still. We are living in times where we're seeing that in policy, in behavior, and I think it's important to be out there and say, I am not apologizing about who I am, about what I feel, about who I love, and I think that's important. And it's important that we do this. This is one of the reasons why I'm telling my story, is that we need to see different faces. We need to see young faces and old faces and brown faces and gray hair, all talking about who we love and why it's important to be allowed to love who we want to love. If somebody is struggling to come out, I want to say that you need to be gentle to yourself, that it's scary, that there is a lot of doubt often placed by circumstances or culture or religion, and that you should allow yourself the time that you need to have to come out and recognize who you are. And it's not a black and white identity, it is a multi-tiered, multi-colored identity that you should embrace. And so that takes time, often when things have not been apparent to you. For me, I came out at a time when some parts of my other identities were solidified. I was very proud of being Latina, of being a Mexicana. I was very proud of being a woman. I was feeling very strong. And so when this consciousness about being attracted to women, wanting to be with women, came a little bit easier. It wasn't easy, but it came easier, I think, because other parts of me, there was some pride around other parts of me. Please, please tell your story. And whether you think it sounds like somebody else's or whether you don't think it's exotic or wonderful, it is your story, and we need to hear all stories in order to really appreciate the vibrancy of our community as a whole.
Lovely. Wonderful. Good job.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.